I'm excited today to talk to you about how to make food a key part of the climate solution. As you know, the pandemic has shuttered factories and grounded airlines, which has been a benefit to air quality, but even in a pandemic, we still need to eat, and with every meal, we have the opportunity to think about how our food choices impact the world. And this isn't an insignificant question. 24% of our greenhouse emissions are already absorbed by the land. And since croplands and pastures cover around 40% of the Earth's ice-free land, we're presented with an opportunity. By changing our agricultural methods, can we use those lands not only to provide us with food, but also to sequester carbon? I'm Devorah Kimmelman-Block. I'm coming to you from my farmhouse in southern Maryland, which is the ancestral home and current home of the Piscataway Indians, who frequently don't get enough credit for their use of regenerative agricultural practices, some of which are still used today. 12 years ago, I started Whole Foods, which supplies regenerative, 100% grass-fed meat to the kosher community. I'm also an owner of the cattle ranch that supplies the beef. Before Whole Foods, I had a vegetarian kitchen for at least a decade because I didn't want to support industrial meat production. Then I read Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma, and I wanted to actualize his ideas. No non-industrial kosher meat, though, was to be found. No kosher farmers market, so I started Whole Foods. Before industrialization, animals were organic. Ranchers worked symbiotically with nature and animals. Meat was an expensive treat. The industrial farm's focus on maximum profit at the expense of animal welfare, the environment, and our health has resulted in 24% of greenhouse gases coming from agriculture. Our planet cannot handle this burden. Clearly, we need to minimize emissions from agriculture. But what if we could do better than that? Unlike other emitters, agriculture also has the potential to sequester emissions. The carbon in our atmosphere is too high. The carbon in our soils is too low. Historically, agriculture has depleted soil nutrients, which has resulted in a lot of destruction. For example, the Fertile Crescent is no longer fertile. And this has ramped up recently. Half the carbon in our agricultural soils has been lost in the past 200 years. However, regenerative agriculture, which fosters maximum plant growth and photosynthesis, can be used to enrich our soil instead of deplete it. The basic principle is to nurture dense and diverse plant growth. Plants use photosynthesis to bury carbon. Carbon enables the soil to hold water and stabilizes soil through building roots and root networks. It also helps to make nutrients in the soil available to plants and animals. There are practices like no-tilling, cover crops, diversity, and grazing animals. Grazing animals builds dense, diverse pastures, and dense, diverse pastures are one of the best ways to increase photosynthesis. Many of the farming practices used in regenerative agriculture have been around for as long as farming has, and include a rich diversity that stems from indigenous and African traditions and even rabbinic traditions. For example, Shabbat and Shemitah and the Shemitah year emphasize rest, and the rest period, or the period of regrowth, is a primary feature of both. However, the way the soil works, or soil science, is new. The biggest discovery was of a fungi that enables plant roots to extend and communicate beyond themselves to a network that connects plants to minerals and other plants. This makes the plants more nutritious to animals and to humans. In addition, the fungi are made of carbon, So they sequester carbon in the soil. Most of a prairie's carbon sequestration happens below ground, where prairie roots can dig into the soil up to 15 feet or more. Prairies can store as much carbon below ground as a forest can above ground. In fact, the prairie was once the largest carbon sink in the world, bigger even than the Amazon forest. In addition, healthy soil needs less fertilizers and other additives, and it can hold more water, which helps with erosion, flood problems, withstanding drought, and weird weather due to climate change. So it's more resilient. And this all helps the bottom line, the farmer's bottom line. Just as Adama, or human, is the root for Adama, or soil, so too is our health rooted in our soil's health. A study published by the Journal of the American College of Nutrition demonstrated reliable declines in key nutrients found in 43 different fruits and vegetables over the past 50 years. Dr. Christine Jones writes, over the past 70 years, the level of every nutrient in almost every kind of food has fallen between 10 and 100%. So an individual today would need to consume twice as much meat, 3 times as much fruit, and 4 to 5 times as many vegetables to obtain the same amount of minerals and trace elements as available in those same foods in 1940. Fortunately, regenerative agriculture presents a better path forward by producing more nutrient-dense foods. It's a myth that all animal agriculture is destructive. In fact, it can be used to sequester carbon. It isn't about what is being raised, it's about how or the farming practices used to raise it. As we know, conventional feedlot beef is very destructive to the environment. Conventional pasture, overgrazed pasture, can be dry land. Pasture using regenerative grazing is lush, and we will go into how this happens. So I wanted you to look at this slide, which is Qantas, a respected environmental research firm. They did a life cycle analysis of a regenerative cattle ranch in Georgia. And while there's debate on what should be included in this life cycle analysis, the sequestration rate is clear and meaningful. So how can we restore the dense, diverse pastures of the Great Plains, which were once one of the world's biggest carbon sinks? Well, how were the Great Plains formed? Nature and nurture. Large herds of animals being chased by predators, frequently moving from place to place. And after leaving an area, there would be a long period of rest and regrowth for the plants. Likewise, Plains Indians purposefully moved buffalo herds to specific areas of land that they knew were depleted in order to fertilize and aerate them. So how do we mimic this sort of range building in a modern day ranch? We do it with fencing. So clearly, there are many benefits of regenerative agriculture, but let's dig a little deeper specifically into its potential to sequester carbon. First, it should be noted that no sequestration or drawdown practices should ever be thought of as replacing reductions in emissions. Turning off the emissions tap, is the quickest way to slow climate change. Any kind of drawdown should only be used in addition to turning off the tap in order to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are already in the atmosphere. And for that, regenerative agriculture is an age-old, pre-tested, comparatively super inexpensive tool. If you're looking only at drawdown and not including all of regenerative agriculture's other benefits like resilience to climate change, runoff and erosion reduction, and more nutrient-dense food, then while regenerative agriculture's sequestration rate is meaningful, there are still some challenges. For example, 1. Sequestration is hard to calculate and can vary dramatically per location, practices, and calculation method. 2. Effects lessen over time, so soils can get saturated with carbon and then not be able to absorb as much. 3. If farming practices change, the sequestration the carbon may be re-released into the atmosphere. 4. It requires more land, so our focus should be on using it on marginal soils where crops don't grow well. If a forest is destroyed because we need more land to feed the world, then we will have defeated our drawdown purpose. 5. Methane sequestration is difficult, although it too can be sequestered using regenerative agriculture. And 6, there is a question of whether enough nitrogen is produced to stop fertilizer use when growing corn or soy on an industrial scale. All that said, since grasslands play such an important role in storing carbon, the bottom line is simple. Sustainable, optimized grazing and restoration of degraded pasture is crucial for drawdown as well as future food production. So, how do we support regenerative agriculture? 1, vote with your meals. Buy Whole Foods meat. When you're eating meat, buy Whole Foods meat. 2, support legislation that eliminates farm subsidies for industrial corn and soybeans. 3, support legislation that ends confinement and commodity animal production and ends antibiotic use in animal feed. And specifically, support Representative Pingree from Maine's Agricultural Resilience Act, which is sort of a green agriculture Green New Deal, and includes all of this and more. So with Whole Foods, we take a step towards a new kind of future, one filled with deeply flavorful, nutritious foods that restore rather than deplete our planet. Foods that are produced in ways that build soil health, ensure animal welfare, and protect agricultural workers. In short, I'm talking about foods that are a key part of the solution instead of the problem. And that's a revolution I want to be a part of.